Greetings and welcome to today's webinar on Inform Distribution Center, our warehouse management software. My name is Jim Messina and I'm your host for today's webinar. Just so everyone is aware, we are recording today's session. Later next week, we will be mailing out a link to that video so you can rewatch this. Also with us today is both Lisa and Michael. They are in the Q&A chat room, so if you have any questions at all along the way, please submit your question into the Q&A box. Again, we're going to do our best to answer as many of your questions as we can live, and we will also send out a recap of those questions and answers next week along with the video link. So a brief overview of what we're going to look at today. I'm going to kick things off by discussing some of the benefits of the warehouse management system and what it can do for your warehouse and kind of the reason for it. And then I do want to show you a little bit of what the barcode scanner looks like in case you have not seen that yet. I know many of you are familiar with it. Some of you are not, so I want to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page as to what type of device will be used throughout the warehouse. And then we're going to actually do more of a hands-on demo with that. So I like to run through as many of the options I can. So we're going to really follow a product throughout its life cycle. So we'll do a little bit of a PO receiving, bring it into stock. Then we'll do a put away, putting the items back on the shelf. We'll talk a little bit about how we do cycle counts and how we replenish and turn through the inventory. And then we'll start to wrap up by picking sales orders and shipping items out the door. So that's going to be the majority of today's session, is just kind of following all the different warehouse functions all the way through the end. And then we'll wrap up by discussing what it takes to deploy the system in your warehouse, and what kind of investment is involved, give you some pricing information, and that's just kind of identify how you'll be able to move forward if you choose to implement the warehouse management system. Okay. So right off the bat, some of the benefits that you're going to see by the system is error-free scanning. So a barcode scanner is going to be in the hand of all of your warehouse employees all the time. So when you're scanning, let's say, a purchase order, if there's a mistake and the vendor ships you the wrong item, it's going to stop you dead in your tracks. It's going to tell you, hey, that's not on this PO. That doesn't belong here. It's also going to help you with serial numbers. If you choose to maintain serialized inventory, you could scan that serial number right into your system, and there won't be any miskeying, there won't be any errors, there won't be any problems with getting the data entered incorrectly because there's no more manual keying. You're scanning the serialized barcode. And it also has validation for that to make sure that you don't accidentally scan the product barcode as a serial. It has ways to make sure that mistakes aren't made. And then as far as mistakes being made, this will also eliminate mispicks. And I highlighted this one for a reason. This is probably the biggest area of improvement that you're going to see. This is where you'll get most of your return on your investment. When it comes to picking errors, those go away almost completely day one. Because every time you go to pick an order, you're going to be scanning the items off the shelf. And it's going to validate and make sure that you scan the right bin location. It's going to make sure that you scan the right product. And optionally, even make sure that you scan the proper unit. So make sure that you scan a case as opposed to an each. With that layer of validation, you're really eliminating so many opportunities for mistakes to be made and for the wrong product to be picked. So you're going to see that from just kind of day one. You're not going to have customers calling you anymore saying, hey, I didn't get this item, you gave me the wrong one. You're not going to be rerouting your trucks. You're not going to be entering all these return orders. It's going to save you a lot of time and effort and make your customers a lot happier. So that's why I wanted to highlight that. And later on, when we actually get into picking a sales order, we'll take a look and see what that looks like. Another benefit here is just total visibility. When you start maintaining inventory by bin location, you have the ability, both in the scanners in the warehouse, but also from Inform, to look at what you have on the shelf and get an actual bin quantity breakdown. So it's not just a question of, how many do we have in stock? It's where is it in stock? How did it get there? Who was the last person who put it there? Who's the last person who cycle counted that? Who's the last person picked from that bin location? So you're getting this bin quantity information, but you're also getting a transactional history. You get a full audit of all the bin locations. You can see everything that's happening, all the activity that's happening within those bin locations. And if you wanted to, you could even build reporting metrics out of that. So you could kind of see who's picking the most, who's receiving, who's really pulling the weight and who's not. Because again, all that information is being tagged and audited. Right? And the last major benefit I have outlined today is efficiency. So faster onboarding. If you are going through a lot of turnover in your warehouse, especially when you have some of your busy seasons and may need to take on some additional seasonal help, it's always a little time consuming before there's a comfort level in understanding your product and your merchandise and knowing where things are. Even if you keep similar items together, if you hired me in your warehouse tomorrow, I don't know that inventory. I don't know where those things are. So I have to, it's just a little bit extra work for me to kind of come up to speed. But when I have a scanner in my hand, it's doing some of the work for me. It's directing me. It's telling me where to go. It's telling me what to pick, and it's stopping me from making mistakes. So after I learn how to pick a single order, I'm already comfortable and well trained on how to pick dozens of orders or hundreds of orders. So it really kind of reduces your amount of time spent on training. And you'll also find that there's a reduction in the amount of time spent traveling in the warehouse because you're not going to have to be hunting down and looking for items anymore. So, right now, I'm sure there's a lot of inventory where mostly we keep things in the primary bin, but sometimes we keep stuff overhead. Sometimes we put stuff on the back wall. Sometimes we just run out of space and we stick it somewhere else. And so people have that information. I'm sorry there. I had some audio issues there. Hang on one moment, please. Sorry about that. I think we should be better there. So as I was saying, faster onboarding for your employees, and you'll also find reduced travel time because they're not going to have to spend their time looking for where the items are. We know where everything is in the warehouse, and there's going to be a much higher level of inventory accuracy. So we're never looking around, walking up and down the aisles. We're always going to have what's in front of us and be able to trust what's on the scanners. And another huge time saver is the elimination of physical inventory counts. So if you're doing an annual physical inventory and shutting down the warehouse for a weekend, there's really no need to do that anymore unless you just like to for accounting purposes, because you're going to find that your inventory accuracy is going to be so much higher that it's just not going to be worth the time investment. Now, we're still going to recommend that you do routine daily cycle counts or weekly cycle counts. But even there, you're still going to find a much higher accuracy level than you're used to. And again, it's because you're scanning everything every step of the way. So by preventing all these errors from the moment you receive an item to the minute it gets shipped out the door and every step along the way, you're just not going to have any of these inventory discrepancy errors like you're used to. All right, so here's a picture of what one of the barcode scanners looks like. This right here is the Zebra MC3300. These retail for about $1,600 or so. And it's kind of done in this kind of gun style configuration where you're holding a trigger and you're able to kind of pull that trigger to scan the barcodes. We find that these models work best for us because we do want to have access to a keypad so we could enter in quantity adjustments. For the most part, there shouldn't be too much hand keying of item numbers because all of your products are going to have barcodes on them. So in theory, everything should be scanning. So it really just a matter of entering quantities during PO receiving and possibly during order picking. So this really should be in your warehouse team's hands every step of the way. As they receive an item, as they put an item away, as they cycle count an item, and as they pick it for a sales order. We're always scanning the bin location and we're scanning the product. So I just want to have an example of that in case you haven't seen this before. What I'm now going to get into in our demonstration is I'm going to show you what the software looks like that runs on top of this particular scanner. We are compatible with other models as well, but this tends to be the most popular model. This supports Android. We are also compatible with Windows models. All right, so let's start our demo off with PO receiving. Before I jump into that, I just wanted to show and kind of outline a few workflows that we do support with our PO receiving. So our receiving is compatible with multiple simultaneous users. So if you want to have 2, 3, 4, 5 people work on the same receiving at the same time simultaneously, they can do so. On a similar note, you could also combine orders together. So if your vendor gives you multiple shipments at the same time, you had it in your system as 3 purchase orders, but it was really just 1 delivery for them, you could put those all on the same receiver and again have multiple users share in that receiving process. Now, in addition to just selecting individual orders, if you're doing any container imports, you can select an entire container and validate against that entire receiving. And on a similar note, we're also compatible with any integrations, any EDI integrations for advanced ship notices. So we're compatible with American Standard, along with tons of other vendors. So if you already have an ASN integration with us today on the Inform side, This is just going to be deployed to your WMS system automatically. There's no additional setup steps, no additional fees. If you're using ASN, you have it on your scanners, and you'll be able to validate against those and make sure that what the vendor said they shipped is what you actually scanned. So you actually get a discrepancy report that you could, make sure that, hey, how come they said they were sending this serial number, but I found another one, and be able to address and make those corrections right there on the receiving dock. So that's just kind of a quick picture of what it may look like if I was to pull in an ASN. And I know I have a number of Johnstone companies with us today. We do support the Johnstone Corp transmissions as well. And it's very similar to the ASN process where you would be able to select which type of transmission it's going to be, select your date, and it's going to take all of the POs that came in from Corp and put them all onto one combined receiver. So let's switch over to that now and take a look at that. So up on the screen now is what the warehouse software would look like. Very simple to navigate through, just a simple up and down arrow key. And I'm going to go down to my PO receiving. And I'm going to get started on a new receiver. Now, there's currently a receiver already in progress. Maybe someone else is working on that. I'm just going to go ahead and make a new one. And I'm able to enter in my PO number if I have it. I could also choose my orders from an inbound list or select my ASN, select my container. In this case, I know my PO number, so I'm just going to hand key them in. If you pre-print any open receiving tickets, those do have barcodes on them, so you could scan the barcode to pull the order number in. So lots of ways to get the order information entered. And once I have it, it says, great, part of this receiver is this one purchase order. Did you want to begin scanning, or did you want to add another purchase order? And I'm going to go ahead and actually add a second PO to this. Okay. And at this moment, this receiver, which number is listed up here, this is receiver number 98. Anybody can now begin working on this receiver. Even though it's up on my scanner, you could jump in as well and begin scanning on this receiver with me. And the first prompt that I see before I'm able to scan anything, it's going to ask me to print out labels. So these are items that I've already said I do not have barcodes on them. My vendor does not provide barcodes, so I want to self-print out my own labels. So we're asking your receiving team to print them out, label them, and that way they have something that they could scan receive off of. We could also skip the pre-print if you want. We could actually have it pre-print, print as you go if you want to relabel items and maybe have your own branded label. You could do that as well. For right now, the assumption is that I'm going to have most of my barcodes already in place. We will talk a little bit about how we gather that data towards the very, very end when we talk about implementation. For now, the assumption is that I already have a lot of this barcode data, and these are items that don't have barcodes, so the system's going to generate one for me. And at this point, I could begin scanning my receiving. So I walk up to any item, and I go ahead and scan it. I would scan the UPC number. And when I scan it, I'm able to see the description. I'm able to see how many are currently open and how many I have scanned so far. Now, as far as entering quantity goes, it's up to you whether or not you want to enter in a quantity or if you want to scan or do both. So for instance, if I was to just keep scanning this item over and over and over again, scanning each carton individually, it'll keep increasing my quantity. Alternatively, I'm going to scan a different item here. I could say that maybe I get 12 boxes of these on each pallet. So if I scan one, that's great, but I know I have 12 in front of me. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in 12 because this is both a product and a quantity field. This is great, you have 12. If I did that again, once I scan it one more time, it thinks I have 13. I say, no, go ahead and add another 12. So I simply type in 12. It's going to bump me up to 24. Likewise, it's going to bump me up to 36. So it's possible just to enter in the full count if you want to count it all, or if you're just counting what's in front of you, especially if you have items split on multiple pallets. This might be the best way to do so. And for smaller individual cartons, just scan individually, and it'll kind of keep a rolling balance for you. Now, if you were to scan serialized inventory, so here I have an item that is serial number required, it will immediately prompt me and say, great, what's the serial number? And it does have some error prevention in here, so if I was to scan my UPC code again by mistake, it's going to tell me, hey, that's not a serial number. You can't bring that in. You have to scan what we think is a valid serial number. All right, so that's one of my serials, and says, great, you now have a quantity of 1. Scan the next serial. So I don't have to keep scanning the item. I could just type in, I could just keep scanning additional serials. At that point, I've now scanned all 5. It's removing from that item. I could continue on with my PO. If I find more of one of those older items, that's fine. It just picks up right from where I left off, bump me up to 37. I'll go ahead and add another 12 to that. Right. So very simple to scan and receive. Now, if you scan an item that's not on the PO, we will flag that and we'll say, hey, that's actually not part of your receiver. And anytime you see a message like this, we're letting out like an audible beeping sound. So we're notifying you right then and there. We're saying, hey, look at your scanner. This is not on the receiver. Have to set this aside, talk to someone in purchasing, and figure out what you want to do with this item, but we're not going to let you bring this in right now. So we give you warnings for situations like that. We would also give you a warning if you were to overscan. So if I was to bring in too many of these, it's also going to beep and say, hey, that's more than you're supposed to have. Go ahead and double check that. And if the vendor sent it, that's okay. I could go ahead and accept that. So it will allow me to over-receive. Now, if I scan something we've never seen before, you scan a brand new item, you just special ordered it, we don't know what it is, we will identify that as saying, hey, that's probably a new item. We don't recognize that barcode. Do you want to go ahead and add it? So once you're up and running, you already have all your existing inventory barcode, but the receiving team is really the front line for bringing inventory in. And that's why we're asking them to either produce a product label with the barcode on it or to scan and update that barcode on the fly. In a moment, I could pull up a list of items, so it does allow you to go paperless here. You don't really need a receiving ticket to validate against because you're able to see what's open and also what you've completed so far. And when you're done with this particular purchase order, if you've double-checked everything and you're ready to receive it, you could go ahead and update it. You could also just back out. All your work is being saved here in real time. So if I was just to back out to my main menu, I haven't lost anything I scanned so far. I could just pick up and resume, pick up from where I left off. And like I said earlier, another member of my team could join in with this PO and start working on it. But if this is complete and that's what the vendor sent, I could go ahead and update that. And I will be warned that, hey, you didn't finish this. Are you sure? Maybe you want to check that list one more time, double check your count, make sure that you're not over or under anything. And likewise, if it's all complete, I could just say, nope, go ahead and receive that. And optionally, if you want to print out a receiving ticket, we can ask you now if you want to print that out. Okay. That receiver is done. Those stock receipts are complete. That inventory is in stock. Now, the one thing I didn't show you part of our receiving is that we are compatible with special orders and staging. If you have a sales order that is linked to a purchase order, traditionally for non-stock items, we could flag those. So we could warn you while you're receiving and say, hey, that's a special order. So maybe you want to set it aside, or maybe you want to put that to your staging area. And optionally, we could ask you if you want to print out labels. So you could print out one of our staging labels. We don't actually need that internally for any reason. That's just the visual cue for you and your team to know who it's for, what order number, what customer, who created the order. Because we're going to track that. No matter where you put that inventory, we know that it's reserved for that order. And we can lock it down and prevent other orders from taking that inventory so that no one says, oh, great, we have this here. Let me go take that from my customer. We could say, no, 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 you can't have that. We reserved this specifically for this order. So you have some flexibility there whether or not you want to reserve that inventory or not, or print a label or not. And it's, again, part of our receiving process. Now, once I brought the inventory into stock, my next step is to put the inventory away. And we have a couple different methods you can use to put the items back on the shelf. Starting first with cross-docking. So when I was in my PO receiving before, it actually did say the word dock on it. And that means that every item being received so far is being received to my dock location, my receiving area, and that is a valid bin location. And typically we then put away from the dock to a shelf. But there's going to be certain inventory or certain times where you're going to bypass that dock. If you have any inventory that goes straight from the receiving truck directly to your shelf, maybe if it's like a larger pallet, something you're not actually physically setting down, maybe you don't have enough space in the warehouse to put it down. If it's going straight to the shelf, you're actually able to override that right from the receiving. So you could select the bin, and at that moment you could scan any bin location you want because we're going to track that inventory, we're going to know where it is, or you can pull up a list of existing bins and put the item away there to its primary location. And so that cross-docking is available directly from PO receiving. Another option that we do have available is a guided put-away system. Now, this is somewhat sophisticated. It's usually not something that we kick off on day one. It's usually we kind of roll out over time. But if with the right kind of setup, if we understand the cubic capacity of your warehouse, we need to know how much volume is on your items and how much volume fits in your bin locations. Only a couple other markers as far as what type of items go in those bins, what type of shelf clearance do you have. Is it double deep? Can it fit multiple pallets in there? But once we have all that metrics in place, during the receiving, you could actually break up and tell us how many pallets of an item you've got. And we could generate a label that looks something like this, which is called a put away label. And the bin location you see on top here, which is ILP Bay 17, left-hand side, it's going to generate that by identifying where do we have space available. So we're going to try to find the most efficient place to put that inventory, ideally as close to the primary bin as possible, but also in a location that actually has available space so that your team doesn't have to spend time wandering around the warehouse looking for an available shelf to put this inventory. This works particularly well for large inventory. This works good for pallets. This works good for cases of paper. This works good for maybe bubble wrap, less so for smaller parts. So you might want to use this at a maybe paper distribution or janitorial goods. Might make less sense for plumbers or electrical supply houses. But it is an option that we do have available to sort of print out this guided put away that really maximizes the available space in your warehouse and eliminates the need for your team to have to hunt around and look for available shelf space. Very useful if you are low on shelf space. So if you have a smaller warehouse, limited real estate, or maybe you have multiple buildings set up, you just don't want to lose that time looking for an available shelf. So again, that is an option. As another alternative, though, and probably the most popular method, is what we just call a simple put away, or just a very standard put away, where we bin transfer the inventory one item at a time from the receiving dock onto the shelf. So it's a very straightforward process where we scan the item and then we scan the shelf that we put it away to. And I do want to show you what that looks like briefly so you can see it. But the picture I have listed on here is of our job list, which is kind of our fail-safe to make sure that nothing got left behind. So let's take a quick look at that. I have a function here called bin transfer. And I could walk up to any item, maybe some of the items that I just received. And we actually use this bin transfer for a variety of functions. We use it for replenishments. We use it when you need to move inventory throughout the warehouse. If you're reshuffling your bin locations, you would use a bin transfer. In this scenario, I am moving from the dock to my hopefully primary bin. So we have an option here to say, put me into dock mode. Go ahead and assume the dock for me so I don't have to type in that word. So I'm going to press my function key there. It says, great, you have 198 in the dock. Well, that's terrific, but I could only fit 48 boxes on my forklift, so that's all I'm taking with me right now. So you could override the quantity. And we're saying, great, where are you putting it away to? Now, you're allowed to put this anywhere you want because the system's going to track that. It's going to add this bin as a secondary location along with this quantity of 48. And later on, when you deplete that quantity, we can automatically remove that location. Typically, we will hold on to a primary bin location and probably also a showroom bin location as well, or like a sales counter bin location. But that, some of the rules there are flexible depending on if you want to have more of a rotating warehouse, or if you want to, always keep a home for your items and maintain a primary bin. But the secondary says no need for you to edit that in the product master anymore. The system knows exactly how many are in there, and when you deplete them all, it knows, great, that bin's done. Let's free that back up again. So at this moment, you could scan any location you want. Your bin locations will have a barcode on them. We will help you, print out bin labels. And we do tell you here, this is the primary. So head over to aisle 7, bay 3, see if you have any room there. If you don't, then you tell us where you want to put it. But I'll go ahead and scan my primary bin. And those 48 have now been put away, and it's letting me know that I have transferred a quantity of 48 from the dock to aisle 7. At this point, I would walk back to my receiving dock, and I'd scan the next item, and just repeat this process until my put away job is complete. Now, as a fail-safe, to make sure that nothing was left behind, we do have a function up top here called the job list. I'm actually going to be touching on this quite a few times today because this really ties into our paperless workflows. This is a running task list for all the different departments within the warehouse. So we could tell you that you have orders to go pick, we could tell you that you have cycle counts to perform, and we will tell you when you have bin transfers that need to be done. And so items that are sitting on my receiving dock, such as some of these items that I just put away and some of the other items that I just did the receiving on, it's saying, hey, these are sitting here on your dock, and it probably needs to go back to the primary bin. And you could jump into a bin transfer directly from here, so I could actually choose this job, and it says, great, go put these away. So you could work entirely out of the job list if you prefer, but the idea is that after the receiving takes place, every item should be put away to a bin location, even if it's to a staging location. You know, if it was a special order item, like what I have over here, this didn't go to the dock, this went to my special PO bin, which is just a heads up for me to know this was a special order. I probably printed a staging label on it. So I know that I want to put this into another area as opposed to the primary bin location. So the goal here is that really everything should have been put away. You know, unless there are times where you're going to leave things on the receiving dock because you know it's going to be shipping out the next morning. Okay, there's always going to be exceptions to the rule, but you should know what those exceptions are. What you don't want to see is your job list showing you that you have, you know, 85 bin transfers to do. You know, that tells us that no one is actually putting items away correctly, and we have a problem. Now we really can't track the inventory. So it's useful as a task list, but also there as a fail-safe to make sure that everybody is kind of working correctly. Now, on that same topic of the job list, we do also provide what's called a job dispatcher. And this is a screen you can use to drag and drop and assign jobs to individual employees. Now, it might be kind of hard to see there from the picture, so let me just go ahead and pull up a slightly larger example. And so what I have here on the left are a number of my open jobs. These were the same jobs that we were seeing before in my job list on the scanners. But then on the right-hand side, I have all of my warehouse employees. And very similar to the truck manifest, you could actually drag and drop and just assign a job to individual warehouse employees. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Brian to put this item away. And once I do that, this will now show up on Brian's scanner, and it will not show up on anyone else's scanners. So you do get a few options with the job list. You can either leave all the jobs unassigned, and anyone can work on any job at any time, or you can narrow it down and say, no, I'm going to decide who does what and who's going to do which jobs, you know, who's going to do my putaways, who's going to do my order picks, who's going to pick what order, and you could, you know, assign them out. And so this gives a warehouse manager a little bit more visibility and a little bit more insight. And even if you don't assign the jobs, it also just gives you a heads up as how many tasks need to be performed. And, you know, you could filter that to the different job types. So if you want to pull orders or see your cycle counts, you could filter to just, you know, any of those. So the job dispatcher is a very useful tool that will allow a warehouse manager or supervisor to kind of keep tabs on what's being done in the warehouse and make sure that the work is being divvied up fairly. Now, so far, the only job list function that we've looked at is the bin transfers used for the put away, but there are a number of tasks that we put in there. I will talk a little bit later about the order picking. We do have a lot of paperless order picking options, and they just kind of feed right into that job list. We also support kit production work orders in there, as well as putbacks, which is actually a relatively newer option whenever you have a customer who maybe cancels an order, or maybe you have an item that was returned and now it's ready to be put back to the shelf. We now actually kind of break those out into a separate putback job, letting you know that, hey, you know, this item is off the shelf, go put it back on the shelf. And this really helps keep that inventory in order, because if someone goes and grabs it and puts it on the shelf, but they don't tell us and they don't scan us, well, there's the fail-safe. Now the job said, hey, we don't know where that inventory is. You better go tell us. So if you keep on top of your job list, you know that your inventory is going to be as accurate as possible. And speaking of inventory accuracy, it's time to talk about cycle counting. Now we have a few different options for cycle counts. The most common one that I think many of you are familiar with or using currently is our physical inventory system. We do have a scheduled cycle count system that can identify which products you should be counting based off of their ranking. And you're able to configure that based on the volume of work you're able to achieve in a day. So you could say, I want to count, you know, a dozen items a day, I want to count 50 items a day, 100 items a day. And it can do a sort of random selection based on the item's velocity and say, great, go count these items. And so if you want to use that method on the scanners, you can do so. You could freeze your inventory, you could pull up on the scanner. Anything that you scan is going to instantly feed back. So you don't actually have to use the count sheets anymore. You could do this completely paperlessly. Any number that you enter on your scanner is going to immediately show up on that physical inventory screen in Inform. So everything's being updated in real time, still giving you a chance to review, run your variance report, and update when you're ready. The nicer thing here is that we now know, since we have this bin level inventory, what's truly on the shelf versus what's off the shelf. We know what left out the door for a stock transfer. We know what left out the door for a sales order. That inventory gets pre-counted now. You'll still be able to see it and review it, but we're going to say, oh, those are ship confirmed. Those are done. You don't have to worry about that. Focus on just going to the bins. So it actually streamlines and makes the counting process a lot simpler. Having said that, it's not really what we recommend, because you still have to freeze and then run a variance report and then update it. This works really well if you're doing it after hours, or if your cycle counter comes in, before the day shift begins, before anyone's doing any actual order picking. So if you have time to get this process done, then it runs fine. But in a real-time inventory system where people are always picking, receiving, and putting away, bins are going to get thrown. They're just going to get thrown off. They're going to throw out of whack. So what you really want to do is count things in real time. And we have an option for that I like to show you called the bin count. And this is nice because it's a softer count. It doesn't actually adjust your inventory immediately because we're now maintaining different values here. We have your total on hand, but we also have your total quantity by bin. So you can actually count the bin, and if it counted perfectly and there's no problems, great, you're done. But if you did count and you made a discrepancy, we're going to flag that. We're going to say, okay, wait, something's wrong here. You can't have 10 in stock, but only 8 in a bin location. Someone needs to go recount this. And so we do have this option for a variance double check. But again, you could do all this without having to, do these freezes or do any of these hard stops. You can just kind of do this while you work. So taking a quick look at that, I'm going to jump into a bin count. And you walk up to your bin location. So I'm going to work in aisle B12. And I scan my product. Count how many you have. I found 25 of them. And specifically, this particular count is a blind count. We're not going to tell you how many are supposed to be there. This is not a one that you're able to cheat. This is a routine cycle count. So just simply put, tell me what you found. Well, that's all I found. So I'm going to go ahead and update that. And again, all I've done here is I've changed not my on-hand value yet. There's not been a true transaction here. I have not changed my inventory valuation. I've simply said that that one bin specifically, has a quantity of 25. But we were supposed to have a different number in there. So I've now created a discrepancy. And what the system is going to do immediately in my job list, it's going to say someone else has to go recount this product. And I'm saying someone else because my assumption is that maybe one person does the cycle count, and then the discrepancies might be recounted by the warehouse supervisor. We do have different security levels, so we can decide who is able to do what, who's able to make a true inventory adjustment, who's able to make a bin count. Maybe you can't do either. And the idea here is we're going to say, hey, listen, something's wrong here, right? I said before, 10 on hand, 8 in the bins. That scenario can't happen. Go in there and recount it. And now, since this is a true inventory adjustment, here we're going to let you see all of the bin locations that the item is in. The P here indicates the primary bin, but you can see the different shelves that are here, including the aisle B that I just counted. So I said that there's 25 here. You might want to go back in there and recount it. And maybe you want to count all these bin locations. You're now doing the final inventory adjustment. You could go back in there, tell us what we really have. We actually have 26. I was off by 1. And if you want to, and this could be mandatory, you could even assign a reason code for that. So these reason codes, these tie into Inform. I'm sure some of you are using these already. Used for your inventory adjustment reports and for your financials. You could actually say, did we lose this? Was it damage? What was the reason for this type of adjustment? All right, I go ahead and update that. And now that actually did what I would call, this is actually a hard count where it did change my on-hand value and it corrected my bin at the same time. Now everything's in sync, the item's perfectly counted, and it's been removed from my job list. So there's no more open task for that item. So I think the bin count makes a lot more sense in a WMS environment because we do have real-time inventory. So why not have real-time cycle counting? The only limitation right now is that you would have to tell us which bins you want to count. We do not have a bin count scheduling system. However, that is on our roadmap, and it's something that we're hoping to launch maybe by the end of this year, possibly early next year, allowing us to actually tell you which bins you want to count and funnel that directly into the job list so that you could come in the morning and actually see here in your job list, here are the bins you have to go count. And if you tie that into that job dispatcher I showed you earlier, you would be able to schedule that to certain employees. All right, next up, talk a little bit briefly about bin replenishment. Not too much to demo here, just more just kind of some concepts to illustrate. The first being primary bins. When your primary bin runs out of inventory, but you do have inventory in your secondary or your overflow bins, we will trigger that as a job. So in that same job list where I was doing bin transfer putaways, we will tell you, hey, this has to come from your overstock to your primary bin and help replenish that. You can turn that on or off. There's some configuration options you have there, so we can make sure that we don't tell you, for instance, to take from your showroom and replenish your primary bin. Or let's not take from the bin location that's sitting, one bin to the left. If you have an item on multiple shelves, we shouldn't be telling you to keep those back and forth. We can mark it and say, only take it from what I've deemed as true overstock. Now, for the showroom, if you do have a showroom, as of right now, we don't actually have a place for you to store a true showroom minimum, so we're not telling you to replenish those just yet. Long term, we do want to add that directly to the scanners. However, for the time being, we can actually do that through our report writer. So we can build, and we've built these before, built some custom showroom replenishment reports, and you're kind of able to specify your own minimum. You can do it with the primary bin as well. If you want to specify a minimum quantity, we can tell you whenever you've dropped below that minimum, and that, hey, you've got excess stock, and here's where the excess stock is. So every day or every week, we could produce a report to your counter, your showroom team. They could be emailed. They take that report. They say, oh, here are the items I have to go get from the warehouse. They pick up a scanner, and they would bin transfer that off the shelf into the showroom. And the showroom would be a bin location, or it might be multiple bin locations. Depends on how detailed you want to go there. Some people just bin every aisle specifically in the showroom. Some go with one giant bin called showroom. Otherwise, they want to actually have every 3-foot shelf to have its own bin location. It's entirely up to you. That could all be configured. And then this is a little off topic on replenishment, but I did want to mention that this system is, of course, compatible with stock transfers. We could scan, receive stock transfers inbound. We could also pick outbound stock transfers. It's going to be very, very similar to both our sales order picking and our PO receiving. So if you know how to receive a purchase order, then you already know how to receive a stock transfer. Likewise, I'm going to get into order picking next. And if you know how to pick a sales order, you know how to pick a stock transfer. Now, we have been adding a lot of new features in the last 18 months to both receiving and order picking. The transfer system has not been updated yet. It will be eventually. So as of right now, it is limited to a single user picking or receiving a single order at a given time. But other than that, the workflow is largely the same. Right. So let's talk about order fulfillment, which is probably the largest topic to talk about today because there's just so many options available when it comes to picking and shipping orders. I want to kick off by talking about some of the paperless options. Now, not everybody goes paperless, and you don't have to go paperless. If you're more comfortable having a pick ticket in your hand, you can still print out the sales order document. That doesn't have to go away. You could print out consolidated picking tickets. It's whatever your team is going to be most comfortable with. But we have really been expanding our abilities to go paperless and send orders directly into the job list. So that job list that I showed you earlier, that is going to have sales orders that you can choose from. But we also want a way to notify you when there is an order to pick. So if a customer comes in for a will call, how do you know about it? How do you notify them? So if your scanner is here on the home screen, roughly every 30 seconds or so, the scanner is actually going to let out a little beeping noise. And if you see here in what I have pictured, it says job list with a little number 3, and that indicates that there are 3 brand new unpicked orders. So if I had my scanner somewhere and I wasn't doing anything, I wasn't in a particular job function at the moment, it would be beeping at me saying, hey, there's some orders to go pick. So that's kind of a way of notifying you. Now we can customize which orders make their way to the job list. We customize this by ship via. Typically, we like to send the will calls, the pickup orders. Sometimes we send the UPS and the FedEx orders. We can send delivery orders if you're going to pick them. So if you are picking orders all throughout the day, as soon as you enter an order, then we might send all orders over there. But if you're batching your trucks and you're picking in the evening, then you might not want your individual truck orders showing up. So we do kind of get to customize which orders show up in there and which ones are our priority orders. And I am going to show you that in just a moment. But here's a kind of a picture of what the orders would look like on my job list. I could see the customers, the order numbers, I could see the ship date, and I could see the shipping method. And I could just kind of choose my order accordingly. Now, we do have paperless options for truck batching as well. So if you do have, pickers that come in the late afternoon and work throughout the evening, and maybe they're picking an entire truck route, if you schedule your truck route first, you could go right into our truckloads, specify the ship date, and it's going to identify, it says, here's all the trucks that currently have orders assigned to them. And before I even choose a truck, on the bottom, you can see it in this picture here, it's giving me a little bit of information. So it's saying, hey, you actually have to make 3 stops, there's 3 orders on this truck, and here's your total weight and piece count and some volume information. And on the very last line there, it says the rate 60% complete. So that's even my indication that someone's working on this and they've already scanned the majority of the items on this truck. So you're even getting some real-time feedback and able to see, you know, has someone started this one? Where are we at with this? Now, this is going to feed the orders in a reverse stop order. So if you had 10 stops on the truck, it's going to say, great, go get stop number 10, get that load on the truck. Now get stop number 9, load that on the truck, stop number 8, and so on. Now, kind of tying into all this and kind of completing our paperless workflow is a new screen we're rolling out soon called the Order Pick Progress screen. And this updates in real time and lets you see the progress of your orders. So I'm going to pull that screen up so that you can see it a little bit better. Right, maybe we'll make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so I have this filtered for the day to say, show me my will calls, show me my pickup orders. I could toggle that and say, show me deliveries or show me both. And as these orders are here waiting to be picked, I could actually see who they're currently assigned to, if anybody's working on them. I could also assign them from here, just like I could on that job dispatcher screen. I could decide who's going to pick what orders. And I could see the progress of those orders. And this is going to update and refresh every 30 seconds. So if I'm out there working on this order, scanning it, you're going to be able to see how close I am to completion of that order. And you can even toggle it to say, you know what, only show me incomplete orders. So this is going to be very useful in a lot of different scenarios. It's going to be useful if you know, again, going back to that scenario of evening picking, you're not sure yet, are we getting out of here today at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, midnight, 1 in the morning? But if you're kind of watching the screen and you're setting it to auto refresh, like I said, every 30 seconds or so, this is just going to keep updating, and it's going to let you know kind of a total count here in the upper corner. So you're going to be able just to keep at a glance and go, yeah, you know what, we're 20% complete for the night. Just give you a better idea of, you know, how close we are to finishing our truck routes. And that's if we were using it for truck picking. If you have it set the way I have it here for pickups, you know, you could put this, if you wanted to, have the screen set on a monitor, mount a big monitor somewhere in the warehouse, and anyone can look up and see that, hey, there are open orders. So now my scanner's beeping at me every 30 seconds telling me I have orders, and the monitor is showing me that I have open orders. And so everyone's able to just kind of look and see that we've got orders that need to be picked. And as soon as we're done and we complete them, you know, those could be removed if we say only show me the incomplete orders. So again, a lot of flexibility options that you have with this particular screen. And I think it really ties in the paperless workflow all together. All right, and with that, I think we should probably actually pick a sales order and see what that would look like. So let me jump quickly into a quick order from my job list. So I have here an order pull. And I'm going to go ahead and select this local order that just came in. Now, for this scenario, I just want to really walk through what the workflow is like as far as picking items off the shelf. I am going to talk a little bit more about the varying options and workflow options. So, hey, you know, are we staging? Are we loading this on a truck? When do we pack up this order? You know, there's a lot of options when it comes to that. For right now, I'm actually just picking the inventory off the shelf. And you can see this order was already assigned to my scanner, so it's actually letting me know this order is currently assigned to someone. We actually let you know that because it is possible to share in the order, so it's nice to know that, hey, maybe I'm not supposed to be picking this one if you started an order by mistake. Okay, and so what I'm able to see here is my order number, my customer. Over here on the right, I can see how many bin stops I have to make, so there's, you know, 4 more remaining stops to complete this order. And we're telling you here, you know, go to this bin location and go get this item along with this quantity. We also do show you a manufacturer's number if you have that for reference, because that oftentimes is printed on the actual packaging, so it is helpful during order picking to see that. And so our most common workflow is scan the bin, scan the item, confirm your quantity. So I'm going to do that just now. I'm going to scan my bin, which is going to have a barcode on it. And now I'm going to scan my product. And just like in the PO receiving, it said, great, you've now scanned 1 out of 4. I could either type in a quantity or I could continually scan each carton individually. I've now scanned that item in full. Now there's only 3 items that remain, and it says, great, go get the next item. Now, by default, we're going to sort your bin locations just alphabetically. We're going to say, you know what, let's start in aisle 1, aisle 2, aisle 3, aisle 4, or let's start in aisle A, aisle B, aisle C. So we'll just go in the order that you have them. But you can customize and optimize that picking path. So with a little bit of setup, we could actually say, you know what, maybe let's go get some of the heavier material first. Maybe we need to go to the back wall and pick that and kind of build our pallet upwards from there. Maybe we want to cover the entire downstairs region before we go to the upstairs section of our warehouse, or we want to go to this building before we go to the second building. So we could really optimize the picking sequence, again, to reduce that travel time and make it so that it doesn't take so long to pick a sales order. We can maybe pick in the most efficient way possible. Despite us customizing that order, your pickers are really still in full control. They could view the list just like we had on the PO, so I'm going to pull up my list. Right, this again ties into the paperless workflow where we don't really need to have paperwork on everything because here's my pick list. Here's everything that's open that I need to go get. And I could pick these items out of order if I so choose. So I don't have to follow the recommended pick sequence. I'm really in full control of what I want to do there. And here was one of that serialized item I received in earlier. I actually didn't put this item away, so it's still sitting on my dock. So it did tell me to go to the dock and get it. That's another thing we can configure. You tell us if your dock is an area that you want to pick from or never pick from, or maybe pick from as a last resort. You know, only go to my shelves first. Some people say, no, if it's on the dock, don't even bother taking inventory off my shelf. So it really depends on your warehouse situation and how organized it is back there, and you know whether or not you want the pickers interfering with your receiving dock. We could decide, do we pick there first, do we pick there last? So a lot of options on our setup. Once I confirm that's where I'm getting it from, just like any other items, I would scan the barcode. And you'll notice for me, I'm just typing in my item numbers because I don't actually have any barcodes in place here. But typically, you're going to scan your UPC code. It's going to identify that you have the item, and now it's going to say, great, what's the serial number? And we can recommend a serial for you. You don't have to follow that. That typically just kind of goes to the oldest serial number we have on file. But you're allowed to scan any serial so long as that serial is in that bin. What you can't do is make something up. So if you try to scan serial doesn't exist, it's going to tell you, hey, that serial is not here. And that, again, is going on the assumption that I'm maintaining the serials every step of the way. We can say, hey, you know what, we don't really care to maintain serials in inventory. Let's only record them on the outbound when we ship it to a customer, in which case it would have allowed this because it would have said, hey, whatever you tell us, that's what goes. But since I do have serials in the system, I do have to scan one of the serials I brought in before. It doesn't have to be the one we suggested. I could pull out a different one. And great, that serial number will now show up on the sales order. It'll now print down the invoice. It's going to tie to all my serialized history. I'm back in the list, ready to pick the next item. Now what you're seeing on the screen is internal notes. If there's any internal line item comments that are entered by customer service on the sales order, those we do use as warehouse notes. So these could pop up on the scanner, letting us know, do we have to pick the item a certain way? Does it have to be prepped for a customer a certain way? Is there anything we have to be careful of? If there's any special modifications that have to be done to that item, you could let the warehouse know directly without having to have all that information print out on the paperwork. We can show you external line item notes here as well, or even special instructions, but it's our internal notes that are going to pop up on us automatically. All right. And I'm just going to go ahead and continue finishing this order. Now, everything I do on this order is updating the system in real time. Actually, what I wanted to do here was scan the wrong item. So, this box of valves looks very similar to a lot of other boxes of valves that I have. So I'm just going to go ahead and scan the wrong item. And my scanner is going to beep at me. And it's going to tell me, hey, that's the wrong product. And you simply can't proceed when you scan the wrong barcode. And one of the first things I mentioned is the benefit of the system is that it's going to eliminate mispicks, and here's how it does it. It's as simple as you had to scan and validate and tell me what you did. And when you have a lot of inventory that looks, awfully similar or like items sitting next to each other, especially when you have, a box of gloves in 2 different colors sitting on the same shelf, it's very easy to ship out the wrong one. But now when you're going to scan each barcode, we're going to tell you that, hey, you made a mistake here. And so you'll find from day one that these types of picking and shipping errors, they almost go away entirely. It's going to be so rare now that you ship the wrong product out to a customer, mainly because we're just not letting you. I'll go ahead and complete out this order. Now, by the way, I could back out of this order at any time. It is going to save my work. The order is being updated in real time. Anyone in customer service can actually pull up the order and actually see who's scanning it, where it's at. They can see that same percentage information. Likewise, if a warehouse manager is keeping tabs on this order pick progress screen that was auto refreshing, you could see that I'm now 75% done with this order and the last time I scanned an item. So you're able to see, what's going on with it. And what time of day it was last worked on. And we will wrap up this particular order. And I'm prompted here, it's asking me, hey, do you want to print out a ship confirmation document? So I want to talk a little about the workflows and, what we print, when we print, what our different options are there. But typically at the very end of the order is when we're going to trigger these types of notifications. So, hey, did you want to print out a shipping label? Do you want to print out a customer invoice? Do you want to, if you've had back orders, we would maybe spawn the back orders at this time. So we're going to give you all the notifications when you're done with the order. Yeah, you have an option here to even print out some shipping labels, which I'm going to skip over. Okay. That order is now ship confirmed and ready to go. So let's talk about some of the different workflow options that we have, because what I did there was I mostly just picked it, but I also ship confirmed it all in the same step. So that was kind of a single step. We are very adaptable to different workflows. So we actually can stage sales orders. We could pick them to stage them. And what would happen there is at the very end of picking it, instead of saying, hey, did you want to print out your ship confirmation? It could instead look like what I have pictured, where it says, where did you put it? Where's your staging shelf? What's the floor location? And that's going to update on the sales order. You're going to be able to see that. In fact, right there, that picture that you're seeing there is what the shipments tab looks like of sales order entry. And so it says, that's the floor location. And this shows up everywhere. This shows up on documents that you print out. This shows up in the sales order inquiry. Pretty much anywhere you're going to look up that order, you're going to be able to see where it's currently being stored. And that's if you were going to stage something. And so later when the customer comes in for it, you're able to see this is where it is, and you can begin picking from there. Now, optionally during staging, we could print out staging labels. We could also print out shipping labels. So it's, then it's going to really make sense for, what your needs are. If that visual label is helpful for your team, then great, we'll print them, especially if you're picking orders that are way out in the future. So if you have orders that you're staging, you're going to want to hold them aside and know who they're for. So you might want that staging label on them. If we're talking about staging something and the customer's coming in half an hour, well, we probably don't need a label for it. So we give you options there as far as what do we want to print out. Now, if we stage an order, at some point we would have to ship confirm the order. So if I went back into my scanner, I can rescan all the items on that order. So we could do sort of a two-step process where we initially, pick and stage, and then we're ready to actually ship confirm and load. We would scan everything again. That works well if you actually have like a double checker. If that's going to be, too slow a process, or that doesn't make any sense for a will call order, then you can skip the double check, and you're able just to ship confirm from Inform and get your signature, and it knows that you've already staged it. Ship confirmation has a lot of options here. We can prompt you to print out the ship confirmation, as you just saw on my screen earlier. We can also email your customer the ship confirmation, automatically. As soon as you're done scanning it, customer gets an email. Optionally print out shipping labels, and I mentioned before, back order spawning. We've had options for this on the scanners for a while, but coming soon in version 20, we actually can now trigger the back order spawn directly from the scanner. So the moment you're done with that order, you've scanned it complete, you ship confirmed it, we could post the invoice, we could trigger off new back orders, we could print out documents or print out labels. Okay. Some other options that we have available for order picking, we have zone-based picking. So what you see pictured here is I broke up my warehouse into different areas or zones. And so I have a tool shed, I have an upstairs area, I actually have an outside yard. Maybe you have multiple buildings, or maybe you just want to break the warehouse up just into, a couple aisles at a time. So if you have, large orders that you might want to have people share and kind of help with the order picks, you might want to break that order up. So really a few different options here. One is there's order sharing. More than one picker can join in on the same order at the same time. And when they do that, initially it's going to say, all right, everyone just kind of, go towards the same item. And they could flip that and start picking stuff out of order, but now it's up to them to sort of dictate how they're going to split up that order. But when you throw zones into the mix, you have this ability to say, you know what, I'm going to work on this side of the warehouse while you work on the other side of the warehouse. Or I'm going to go outside and work in the yard while you work on the inside of the warehouse. And so your pickers are kind of able to choose which section of the warehouse they want to pick from. And when they're all done picking from, let's say, the tool shed, it'll kick them back to this menu and say, great, tool shed's done. Do you want to move to the upstairs now? Or do you want to just back out of the order and let someone else do that? So again, a lot of flexibility in there, especially for larger orders in terms of kind of sharing the workload or separating it. Now I also have listed here combined orders. That's also a newer feature that allows for multi-order picking. So if you do have multiple sales orders and you want to pick them all at the same time, you could do that. Doesn't even have to be for the same customer, though I would expect more often than not that it would be for the same customer. So, if the customer has 3 stops on your truck tomorrow, you probably want to pick those all at the same time. They'll still be maintained as 3 separate sales orders. We'll still print out 3 separate ship confirmation documents, but we could treat them as if it was just one larger order and let you pick them all at the same time so you could put them all in the same box or the same pallet and ship it out the door. Okay. But if you're dealing with a lot of small orders and, a couple orders just printed out to the warehouse real quick, you could grab them, load them up, have one person, pick them all at the same time. Again, reducing that travel time, making you more efficient, speeding up the process throughout the warehouse. And on a similar note, I mentioned this earlier, optimizing your picking path, deciding what do we pick from and when, what bins do we go to first, what bins do we go to last. Maybe we want to pick the heavier items first, maybe we want to go to the back of the warehouse first, pick from the back wall, then we'll go back over to aisle 1, whatever makes the most sense, so that we're not sending your pickers on a maze all throughout the warehouse. So the key takeaway I really have for the order picking is just to understand that it is very adaptable to what your workflow is. So I've already kind of showed paperlessly, we could say a will call order is created, boom, it's on my scanner, go get it. Oh, do you want to stage that and print the staging label? We could do that. Did you want to ship confirm and print out a ship confirmation document? We could do that too. If you're picking trucks, we could say let's pick the whole truck, and we give you options there. Do you want to pre-pull an entire truck and then later have someone scan them again and have sort of a double checker? Some cases we just let the double checker just do a visual check and we don't have them scan anything at all. So we could just scan an order once. We could maybe scan it twice to be more secure with it. And again, with the print options, we could print out your shipping documents, your invoices. We could print out staging labels or shipping labels. So we really have to talk to you individually and figure out what's going to make the most sense for your warehouse and what's going to be the most efficient. And then I kind of skipped over this idea of pre-pulls and drops, but we have been working on sort of these new reports that try to help if you have evening pickers, but you do have some, maybe your receiving team has some downtime during the day. They might be able to help get some of the inventory on maybe the higher shelves. So we don't have to worry about things in the primary or your front-loaded bins because those are in easy reach. But what about your overflow? They might be able to say, hey, you know what? You already have a couple items that are on your truck. A couple orders that are on your truck that we know we could just drop to the floor right now to make the night shift's life a lot easier. So we could kind of produce and tell you, here are the items that you need to drop from an overhead bin to a lower bin. So again, these are just kind of some of the varying options that we have available in the order picking. So I don't want to get too lost in the weeds on how exactly are you going to be picking orders, because that is going to be modified to kind of fit your needs. Okay. And what I just covered so far is how we pick orders in the warehouse. But we also have a solution for your sales counter and your showrooms. And so it's a little bit different in the showroom in that we have to be completely customer focused. We can't let the technology become a barrier between you and your level of customer service. So we need to prioritize speed. We need to get your customer in and out the door as fast as possible without bogging down your counter team about how they're going to tell us which bin location items came from. So we have a solution that's able to skip the scanning process, but still maintain accurate bin level inventory. And so what you're looking at here is actually what you would see in shipment confirmation. It's going to identify which bin location the item came out of. And so we could actually even make a few assumptions there. We know what inventory belongs in the warehouse, and we know what inventory belongs in the showroom. We can make an assumption that says, hey, if you're ship confirming this from Inform and purposely not using a scanner, let's go ahead and take that out of the showroom bin. That's probably where that inventory came from. We could also support a hybrid picking method, where if you want to start an order at the counter for any inventory that came from your counter area, that's fine. And then you may want to pick the rest of the order using the scanner and maybe send your customer around back to go pick up the bulkier items. You could do that too. You could start an order at the counter and you could finish it on the scanners. So just to briefly show you what that would look like, I want to just ship confirm an order that I have here. This is a local order, customer came in. And I'm shipping them just these 2 items. And what will be new here is you're going to have a little drop down, and a column here for bin quantity. And so again, we made that assumption. We said, oh, okay, your customer bought some valves from you. Well, those are right here in the showroom. So those probably came out of the showroom. And you could override and change the bin locations, but we know that you had it in stock and we know that it came from here. Now, if you were out of stock in the showroom, well, then we wouldn't have taken it from here, because we're not going to let you drive the inventory negative. We're still going to maintain bin level inventory and accuracy. So if that scenario was to occur, you'd see something like this that would say, oh yeah, you think you're shipping 3? Well, we have a problem there. We have a bin difference. This is not a complete shipment. And we'll actually prevent you from ship confirming this order until you tell us which bin location it came from. And it could be the showroom, but it could be any of the bins. If you're going to walk in the back and take it out of the back area, that's fine. You just got to tell us that you did that. And we could default that. I showed you before that we defaulted the showroom, but we could also default primary bins. You know, this particular item I don't have in my showroom, so it just said take it out of the back. So I mean, these are the other things that we're able to customize for you. But if you're working at a busy sales counter, we basically bypass the scanners completely. We let your team ship confirm the same way that they're doing today, that they're used to. And all we do is we just kind of add this extra drop down, which we will already make some assumptions for you and say, we know where that came from. And only in the rare exception that, hey, the showroom inventory wasn't there because you've already sold out of it, well, then that's when you might have to tell us where you get it from. And you walk in the back, you get it, and you might have to come back here and choose a bin. But that would be the exception to the rule. We would not expect you to have to hand key and select every single bin location that you pulled it from against, because we want to optimize speed and get your customer out the door as quickly as possible. So we're able to do this and keep your inventory in check. And again, prevent those bin discrepancies from occurring, because we're not going to allow you to go negative. So we've deployed this now in a number of showrooms. This has been working very well. Again, I have saying here that you would, bypass the scanners. I am specifically talking about scanning the order from the barcode scanners after you've already entered it. If you're using regular small, USB scanners plugged into your computer to build the order, that's really a separate process. You can still use those. That's not going to interfere in any way. Okay. And lastly, what I want to talk about today is what the steps are to roll out and implement the system into your warehouse. So we really break this up into 2 phases. Phase 1 is we're going to have conversations with you, and we're going to learn what's your workflow. We're going to show you more of that sales order fulfillment and figure out how is that best going to work for you. How is that going to look like? Are we going to go paperless? Are we going to be auto spawning back orders? Are we going to be printing out paperwork? Are we going to print by trucks? We're going to ask you a lot of questions, and we're going to figure out how to make this fit and demo it and make sure that you and your warehouse agree that it's going to work the way you intended to. We will also assist you in the creation and labeling of bin locations. And that really just comes down to where your warehouse is at. If you currently have no bins at all, we can make some guidance and give you some tips on the best way to set that up. If you have some old bins that you want to change, again, we'll make some recommendations there. If you already have bins, that's terrific. We'll review them, make sure they look good, and make sure you get set up with a label printer and print out some bin labels. All of your bins will need to be labeled with a barcode similar to what I have pictured here. And that's going to allow us, as you've seen earlier, when I walk up to a bin location, I typically scan that location. I'm able to do that by producing a bin label. You could print these to a couple different varying sizes. I think, usually about 4 inches wide is our most popular size. And as we help you get your bin location set up, maybe the largest part of the configuration is capturing the UPC barcode data. So you might have some of the UPC data in your system, especially if you're using product import a lot. That data is not always correct that the vendors provide, so you might want to import it, you might not. Regardless, we will produce a report similar to what you see listed here that identifies every item that is currently missing a barcode. And it will include, and you can kind of see it there on the bottom of that picture, the grand total. Now, I'm only missing 7 barcodes in my system, so, great, my warehouse is set up. But typically, when we get you started, you might, have thousands of items in inventory, you're going to have to go capture 1,000 of barcodes. And so you're going to do that by walking up to that item with your scanner, and you're actually going to scan that barcode into the system. And so we'll teach you how to do that. It's a very straightforward process. It only takes about a minute per item. It's just that you have, again, thousands of items, so it is going to take some time for you to capture all that information. And then the last piece of phase 1 is assisting with the hardware configuration. So hopefully your warehouse has wireless internet connectivity already. If not, it's something that you have to deploy. As far as getting the barcode scanners, we're going to help you get those configured and on the network. If you don't have label printers already, again, we might have you help you with those, get those added to Inform. So we want to make sure that we have all necessary pieces, everything's up and running, all the items are going to scan, all the bins are going to scan, and once all of that is complete, which, by the way, usually takes somewhere between 3 to 6 months. You kind of do that at your own pacing. I've seen some people get it done in less than 2 months. Some can even go longer. It's really up to you, and how much time do you want to devote to capturing all of this UPC data. Once everything's in place and we know exactly how your system is going to work, we would then come on site for typically a 3-day go live. And we'll schedule what makes most sense for you. Typically, we like to fly out on a Monday, fly home Friday, and then be on site all day Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So about 3 full days is usually enough time for us to go hands-on with your team, and we'll train your warehouse team how to use it how to use it live. So we're going to show them how to scan sales orders, how to do PO receivings. As you've seen so far of everything I demoed for you, it's a very easy system to use. Everything is really listed in front of you. There's only a certain number of functions you could do at any given moment. So we find that it is pretty easy to train your team and get up and running on. But nonetheless, we still want to be there on site to really help train and accommodate all the special situations. Everything I showed you today was pretty straightforward, but of course there's going to be scenarios of, hey, how do we handle this return? The customer refused the item. How do I reroute that on tomorrow's truck? Do I have to scan anything back in? All these different types of scenarios that pop up. We want to be there and help you with it and review how to handle those situations. So that's what an implementation would look like. And as far as pricing of the software, so the implementation is going to be a one-time fee of about $7,200, and that is going to be for everything I just described, all the work that we helped do in phase 1, as well as the on-site go live for 3 days. After that, there's a monthly subscription once you're live of $550 a month, and then $35 per user. Now, this is a monthly subscription, so you don't have to buy any user licenses out of the gate. You're able just to subscribe per user, as many users as you need, and just be billed monthly for that. And then lastly, you have to just kind of consider the price of the hardware. The scanners, we have selected this model because this really actually is in a better price than what some of the models we used to use in the past. It is hard to get these lower cost than that. You might be able to find some of these refurbished, which sometimes helps lower the cost. But they typically retail for around $1,600 or so. And you are going to need one for a number of warehouse employees you have working at a given time. On top of that, if you don't have wireless internet already, might be an investment to make there, as well as some label printers. Right. And that really does it for today's webinar. Thank you so much for taking the time today to take a look at the barcode inventory system. I hope that you see that you see value in it and that you want to learn more about it. If you have any additional questions, please submit them to the QA as you've been doing. We are going to send out this video next week. We're also going to send out the QA. We're going to make sure we double check all the answers and make sure we give you the best information we can. But if you have any additional follow-up questions from there, please contact Lisa. I have her email address here, lisar@ddisys.com. She is happy to answer any questions you may have on the system and provide as much information as possible. So again, thank you so much. Everyone, please enjoy your afternoon.